Can you tell us about doubling down? Can you tell us why you wanted to continue doing this?
We could say that we literally doubled down on the boards. We use almost twice as many boards as we did in the first section. We added sideboards, we added all these arpeggios, we changed...
What are the sideboards?
I'm sorry, the sideboards are the boards that you see on the side of each of these large platforms. Maybe you see them, maybe you don't, but you probably see the dancers reach for them. So in the first version, it was very sort of two-dimensional. Everything was played right in front, and the idea was to give the dancers 3 dimensions to work with. At one point we had 2 in the back for Warren, so he could do like toe punches, hit the boards in the back with toes. So we were just trying to expand our playability on the set in general. We changed all different sorts of music. We added music to existing compositions. So we really just kind of went all in, which was like another version.
Can you tell us about our computer guy here?
Controllerist. Nicholas, describe what a controller is.
Well, most of the time Donovan is basically mixing the show, not really mixing the show live, but arming tracks to play, to record. He's there in case of any emergencies because we're dealing with live instruments on stage. The piece that we're frantically running back and forth and slapping these boards, which we creatively call side to sides, is a series of loops, but the loops are only like 2 bars long, or they're 1 bar long. So we have to get to the board to re-trigger the loop. But as we start to get more bombastic and put more weight to the floor, those things will start triggering by themselves. So Donovan is back there stopping our mistakes,
And then also like arming a completely new set. So if you notice that these change, so he'll have to arm that change. Even in the piano, it's 3 different, sets of, notes.
Yeah.
And, different parts of the keyboard. So
turning tracks on and off. Sometimes he's adding effects. Sometimes he's
playing the piano.
Yeah, playing the piano.
So the question is how they actually put the composition together.
Let's talk about the first piece. The first piece Warren Kraft composed, and we had him do like 3 to 4 different compositions. And he would write them in the computer on the box, and then he would bring us to them. We'd say, we'd like this, he'd go change it, he'd come back, and then we worked on spreading them out on the boards. The first one, we were using all 16 boards, and that just got wild, so we tried to simplify it. The second piece I composed in my apartment, and I sampled a bunch of sounds, a bunch of bottles that I liked around my apartment, and I was playing it on like on a machine, which are like little pads, basically like what we're doing with my fingers, and I had this groove happening, and we were here. I think we were here at the pillow, and I just started playing it for everybody, and they like freaked out, and they liked it, and that was it.
And then because we had, so this is interesting. Nicholas developed the melody that you hear, bum bum bum, bum bum bum, like you hear, and we used it and split it up. And then used what we had already mapped out on these boards to create new melodies. Like, so what we had at our toe tips, basically fingertips, we then have this to play with. What else are we going to do from there? And then Nicholas also had the idea of adding an arpeggio. So things sort of build from what an original melodic idea is. The second work in the show, Greg composed, Donovan composed all the piano pieces, and by the time he was done, composing one of the last couple ones, he had this idea of the way bodies could move closer together with the way the keys would kind of go up and down the register. Because he was like, oh, I see the way you guys are choreographing this now, and sort of thought of that as well. So, and that's something musicians don't necessarily think of, the way their fingers are going to move closer and further apart on a piano board. So it's an interesting, thing that sort of developed, and just each one of them is so incredibly mindful of the dance as music.
I was struck in looking at the two halves of the show. There's a big difference in tone, I think, in the 2 halves of the show. Can you talk about that?
When you first create something, it's hard to see the forest for the trees in a certain respect. So after our Joyce premiere, which was not long ago, he said some great things to us, and I feel like you could probably sum it up better than I can, but that you introduced the human voice for the first time in the second half is a completely different range of emotion and a completely different depth of feeling.
And it's taken on by the dancers and the choreography, which those pieces have always been very emotional. And I think it happened very naturally for you as a storyteller, as a choreographer. I think it was happening for you, but then for it to be observed by the audience, I think just kind of wrapped it up for us a little bit.
You don't see the idea of duet too much and tap with the idea of sort of emotional connection in that way. Can you talk about making those duets, or duet, if you will?
Well, it's interesting. I had this conversation with someone a few days ago who'd seen the original show. And in the original incarnation, Caleb, who you see performing it today as well, did the duet with a young woman, even younger than he. And it had a completely different tone and a completely different journey and experience, I think, for both us as members of the show and the emotional journey in the show, as well as the audience, I'm assuming. And the way that it's grown with Caleb and Byron is, for us, it's a new heartbreaking exploration every single night, in part because, and I always want to reiterate this in any of our Q&As or talkbacks, the dancers, when dancing solos, are improvising. So they have a huge range of freedom that Nicholas and I impose upon them or give them, however you want to look at that. And tonight I just said, I want to see you guys try something you've never tried and break each other's hearts. Friday night, she's one of my best friends on the planet, and that moment with her on stage is incredibly special to me, but because I'm also experiencing her performance of it emotionally, I think of myself as behind a scrim or something. Does that make sense? I feel like, yes, I feel like some sort of a reflection, but as a spirit or a friend, knowing someone going through their life or going through, a heartbreak or going through a million things as opposed to a part of it.
While we're there, maybe you could just briefly tell us about the idea of bringing a non-tap dancer into the show, working with the B-Girl.
I had the opportunity to work closely with a frat in a show that Derek Grant created called Imagine Tap. And I've been a wannabe B-Girl since I was a kid and didn't really have, in my mind, access and opportunity. And then, my fingertips was a new best friend who also taught me a great deal physically about the form. And historically, I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but the early B-boys and B-girls watched footage of the Nicholas brothers and Kung Fu movies. And that was the two major sources of inspiration, tap dancers and flash tap dancers specifically, and then Kung Fu and a handful of other things like funk era dances that led into breaking. So there's a huge relationship, of course, also between vernacular dance, jazz vernacular dance, tap dance, and early hip hop and house dancing.